Okay, let's kick off. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our IT at Cork Gaming Tech Talk, which is very kindly sponsored by Ernst & Young. My name is Ita O'Sullivan, and I'm a member of the IT at Cork committee responsible for these tech talks, and I'll be your MC this morning. I'm sure you're all familiar with IT at Cork, but for those of you who aren't, IT at Cork represents over 200 technology companies in the southwest of Ireland. It is a leading cluster in the region, providing access to training and upskilling, events where members can learn the latest in technology trends, as well as networking and learning and sharing opportunities. It strives to promote member companies on the south of west of Ireland as a location for tech companies. So today's talk, we're going to look at routes to gaming, and it'll focus on the different pathways into gaming, the opportunities for connection and inclusion, and what the future of gaming looks like. We have a stunning panel, and I'll introduce our panelists now. So we have Eileen O'Riordan and Brandon Blanco from BioWave, and you can see them waving. We have Kira Beth Griffin from My Contact. We have Anvi Patel from Paperless Games and Vitush from Paperless Games. Vitush, I figured it was too insulting to pronounce your surname wrong, so apologies. And we have Keith O'Connor from Ramiro Games. I'm really looking forward to emceeing this, and on behalf of IT at Cork, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Ernst & Young, the Tech Talk Organising Committee, and our panel members for their time this morning. Before we begin our panel shortly, I'm going to hand you over to Ian Collins, who's Head of Innovation Incentives for Ernst & Young, and he's going to talk about the gaming tax credit and the announcement of budget last week.
Thanks, Ita. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be joining you this morning, representing EY on our first sponsored Tech Talk with IT at Cork. As Ita said, my name is Ian Collins. I'm a tax partner in EY, and I'm based in our Cork office. And I also head up the Innovation Incentives team, so very relevant for a lot of the audience, I guess, today. Within EY, I guess we've seen quite significant growth over the last number of years. We now employ about 3,200 people across the island of Ireland, and we're anticipating that we're going to exceed the 4,000 mark by the end of next year. So we currently have about 800 open positions. So if you're interested in joining us, by all means, have a look on our website. We're seeing growth and demand across our entire business. So, that covers assurance, tax, strategy, transactions, and consulting. And, particular hot areas are, in the area of data and analytics, project management, transformation. We've also recently launched our EY Law, and that specializes in digital, commercial, corporate M&A, employment, and real estate law. Just to kind of bring it back to more local, I guess, within Cork, we've about 350 people based in our offices there on Laps Quay. And again, kind of bringing it back to today, people may be familiar with the budget that was announced at the start of this week, which actually announced a tax credit, a gaming tax credit, which is to the value of 32% and allowable for projects up to a spend of about 25 million euro. So this compares really favorably with some of the other sort of gaming tax credit regimes that are available internationally. So definitely, something that's very pertinent and very relevant for I guess this morning's topic. The other area where I'm seeing quite a significant explosion of activity is for companies, particularly in the IT and the software development space, and their ability to claim 25% cash back from Irish revenue. So for every €100 you spend on R&D activities, you can actually get €25 back in cash. We're seeing a huge amount of that activity going on, particularly in the IT space. So if that's something that you guys are doing that you're not aware of, by all means reach out to the IT at Cork team or indeed come directly to me, and I'm sure the IT at Cork team will direct you to myself as well. But we'd be more than happy to help. We work with companies, small, medium, and large, so we'd be delighted to kind of help. That's it from me, Ita. I'd like to wish everybody a great morning, and look forward to hearing the feedback from the webinar. Take care.
Lovely, thanks Ian. Wasn't it really good timing and generous of the government to put that gaming tax credit in so we could bring Ian on the talk? Okay, well look, let's start talking about paths to gaming. And our panel today really is the width and breadth of the gaming industry. And that diversity of approach gives us an awful lot to discuss in a relatively short amount of time. That's always the caveat, isn't it? So to begin, I'm going to ask each panel to introduce themselves and their product or company. So first up, I think we're going alphabetical for this one. I'd ask BioWave to introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Evelyn and this is Brandon. So we can tell you a bit about our story and how we started. So BioWave is making modular video game controllers, but the reason we started making this because when we were young, we used to play video games together all the time. So we were best friends when we were kids. And our favorite game was Shrek 2 on the PlayStation 2. And we grew apart, we went to different schools and we lost touch. But last year we reconnected and we wanted to play video games together again, but we couldn't because I actually have a disability. I have a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And when I was 14, I injured my hand, and because of my condition, it never healed. So I'm not able to play video games without experiencing a lot of pain. And obviously this is a huge issue. I looked online, I found millions of other people who are also struggling to find a solution with what is available on the market. We just wanted to be able to build our own controllers. And when I told Brandon about my problem last year, I was really grateful because he was the first person I had met that was really willing to take the step to make a change, because he's an engineer and really passionate about gaming and making solutions for people. So,
yeah, pretty much. As Evan said, like, we're really good friends. When we met up again, we obviously just wanted to play video games again straight away. And she told me about this, and I was like, what? I could not imagine my life without video games. I need them. So I was like, let's just try and shimmy up some sort of solution just for Evelyn. So then we came up with a solution we thought would be universal. We got the 3D printer out. We just kept 3D printing iterations. Then we started putting ideas up in forums. Lots of people got interested. People from all over the world started requesting samples. We started sending them. It started to seem like the modular kit that we were creating was actually working for people. People were sharing their different designs. So then we started thinking about how we could scale it, and everything just grew upwards from there. And I've always wanted to do an assistive tech startup, so this seemed to be the perfect place to do it. So yeah, I think that's the Proteus Controller is what we've developed. It's a modular kit that allows users to connect pieces of the controller together, just like Lego. We have a patent pending for it, and the patent is for the connection mechanism, because it doesn't allow you to just connect it at one angle. You can connect all the modules of various different sizes and shapes at any different angle. And the controller itself, through a patented algorithm, knows what configuration it's in. So you connect it together, press one button, and you decide what console you want to play with, and it just works straight out of the box. It's not an extraordinary, complicated procedure. We've had to get a partnership with Microsoft to allow it work with the Xbox device. And in the future, we hope to do the same with Sony once we sort of have better proof of concept. Yeah, another really big aspect of it is community. Gaming is all about, socializing. We've seen that over the lockdown. The world has moved to the digital world, and a lot of people have started using gaming as a method of socializing. So, it's not fair for a lot of people to be left out of that. But as you build one of the Proteus controllers and it knows its configuration, you can quickly and easily share a 3D render of your controller build and your specific situation or disability online. And other people that might have similar disabilities can use our matchmaking tool to get matched up with that specific controller that you've made. So it connects people as well as controllers, creating a sort of network and community.
That's a great introduction. And as someone who said he'd like to be in a tech startup, that's an amazing first chapter of the book. So that's great. Thanks so much, guys. And next we have Kira Beth Griffin from My Contact.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Kira Beth. I created My Contact as a coping mechanism when I was diagnosed with autism. And when I was 14, I got what some would consider a late diagnosis of autism. For me, it was right on time. and my way of coping with that diagnosis, because it comes with a long list of symptoms that can also be confused as having a personality. I dove into research papers and found that there were really high unemployment and underemployment rates for people with autism. And there were really high rates of employers who said that they just wouldn't employ somebody who couldn't make eye contact, which is one of the major red flag symptoms for autism. So I decided I didn't like those statistics and decided I was going to do something about it. So I learned how to code and built an app to help people with autism learn to make and maintain eye contact that released onto the App Store in 2018. But generally speaking, I'm now doing psychology and computing in UCC, and I want to go on to build more video games that can basically be a power for social good to help people have a better quality of life or just generally improve society.
There's a pretty good second chapter to this book, guys. I think we might have to make it a collective book because that's very impressive. So thanks so much, Ciara Beth. Okay, I mean, Andy and Batouche, no pressure, but Andy and Batouche are from Paperless Games.
Morning, everyone. Yes, so we are from Paperless Games. We create and host virtual games. And the way we came about was me and V, we love playing board games with all our friends. And then the pandemic hit and we had a strict lockdown. And surprisingly, there wasn't many online games out there for friends or families to get together. So I thought, heck it, why not? I just create a game. So I spent like a weekend in a loft just making a game, like a murder mystery. I asked V to help me out, asked his brothers to help me out to create the graphics and everything. And then I made this little murder mystery and we shared it around with all our friends and we played it. And everyone kept saying, this is really good. And I didn't understand. I was like, oh, it's just a game. And then my work, so I actually work at VMware as well, full-time. They heard about it and they were like, oh, we have some team events. There's nothing much out there to do virtually. Do you mind doing some of the games? So me and V did some of our games there and it went a little crazy. People were posting all over LinkedIn, social media, to the point where we've had probably thousands of people play our games. And we only started around September last year, all around the world. We've created 3 games. They're all our murder mystery kind of based. But yeah, that's us. V, if I forgot to add anything, please do chime in.
Yeah, no, spot on. And that's exactly what happens. We then challenged ourselves on each game and made it progressively harder on ourselves. So we made it more interactive and made it kind of like a virtual escape room, one of them as well. I think one was based around Halloween as well. So it kind of gives that sort of element of bringing Halloween to families that weren't able to obviously go. We had kids take part that were around 5 years up. And we had, elderly couples join that are like 60, 70. So it was a very wide range. We thought it would only work for people our age, but it was great to see so many varieties of people. We then it was just so much fun to see so many people join during a pandemic. And actually, we're like, this is the first time we're managing to meet our whole family. And it'll be, 50 odd people joining in a session and they're just talking and laughing and having a great time. So I think it pretty much did the purpose that we didn't intend for, but, we really enjoyed the process.
Okay, this is it's growing and getting better. The product manager in me just loves this we saw a unique small problem we thought we'd solve, and in solving it, actually, we realized we were solving it for an awful lot more people, particularly in the middle of a pandemic. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but what a way to grow, what a story, what a year. And Keith, to round us off then, it's a small little company called Romero Games, is it?
Yeah. I'm Keith O'Connor. I'm CTO of Romero Games. We're based in Galway. We're a game developer founded by John and Brenda Romero, which you might know their names. John is the designer behind games like Doom and Quake and Wolfenstein, and Brenda is also a well-known designer. They're a bit of a power couple behind games like the Wizardry series and D&D and Jagged Alliance and others. We have been going since 2016 in Galway. John and Brenda moved to Ireland and founded a team there. I joined them in 2016 as well. And we released our first game at the end of last year, Empire of Sin, which is a Forex strategy games and Prohibition era Chicago. So at the moment we're I guess supporting that, and we're updating it and working on future games as well.
And I wonder about the similarities between Lockdown Galway and Prohibition era Chicago. There's probably a few. It's difficult to get a pint in both, I'd say.
Yeah, it was funny seeing all the speakeasies open during during lockdown being clamped down on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure now our audience can see that this really is, as I said, the width and breadth of gaming. There's so much here, so many different approaches. The one thing I forgot to say to anybody in the audience is you can type questions into the chat, and I'll either try leave time for them at the end, or if we're running horribly over time, spoiler alert, I have form, we might just start to answer them in the chat as they come in. So you can direct them to a specific panelist, you can ask a general question, but feel free to add them to the chat. So given that diversity and the different careers here, some of them may be kind of that accidental path into it. I saw the problem, I went to solve the problem, and now I'm in gaming. Let's talk a bit about your tech skills, that path in, what skills you've had to learn to get this far. So anybody maybe in the audience who's interested in getting into gaming, what kind of skills, both I would say, let's say tech and soft, would they need to focus on or look for to follow yourselves? And Keith, this time if it's okay, we'll start with you first.
Sure. Well, my path into games, I guess it's been a long time coming. I always knew I wanted to work in games. Well, I knew I wanted to play games when I was small, and then once I realized that actually working in games is a possibility, that's what I went after. When I was in college, there weren't really that many companies in Ireland that I could work on. I knew I wanted to work on, big budget games and major games, and there wasn't really the facility for that in Ireland, besides middleware companies, but I wanted to work directly on the games. So I ended up doing a PhD in computer science in Trinity, because I figured that would be the best way to get a leg up on, getting into the industry. And that worked out well. I ended up working on doing part of my thesis on the cell processor, which was the multi-core processor behind the PlayStation 3 before it was released. And so as the PS3 was released, there was big demand for people who actually knew the hardware. So I ended up moving to Canada to get a job in the industry there. I was going to move to England, but then my wife said, if we're going to move away, let's move somewhere a bit further. So we moved to Vancouver, and I worked there for 6 years at Radical Entertainment, and then moved to Ubisoft in Montreal, and I was a technical lead there for 4 years on games like Watch Dogs and Far Cry 4 and Far Cry Primal, Far Cry 5. And then, well, while we were there, we had our first child, and we decided we wanted to be closer to the grandparents. So we moved home, and through happenstance, I ended up in contact with Brenda when she had been in Ireland. She was doing a Fulbright scholarship going around Ireland, advising universities on how to establish the games industry here, how to teach it, writing a report on that, which is available online somewhere. And I contacted her and said, you know the industry in Ireland better than I do at this stage. What do you think are my chances of moving home and doing the role I'm doing at the moment? And she said, well, actually, as it happens, nobody knows yet, but we're in the process of moving home. And so that's where it went from. It's not really a route. Doing a PhD is a little heavy as a route to enter the games industry. It's not something I necessarily recommend. It worked for me, but really, I think just people, it doesn't even, like, I would say a college degree isn't even necessary to get into the industry. It's really all about what you can do as opposed to what you know. Having said that, for programmers, being able to program well as having a college degree will help, because you're always taught things in college that you wouldn't necessarily teach yourselves, but end up being very useful down the line. And there's lots of areas of computing that you wouldn't voluntarily learn about and look into, but then you realize years later, hang on, there's a lot of application for this.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Keith. I'm going to sum these up after we've heard of it from everyone. So, Andy and the Tush, we might go to you next, please.
Yeah, so pretty much Ambi covered most of it in the first session part, but we both started in university as I did computer engineering and Ambi did computer science, so nothing to do with gaming at all. We then moved into a corporate world, so Ambi works as a system engineer at VMware and I work as a system engineer at Cisco. So again, quite different pathways compared to gaming. But then once Andy came up with this whole idea about games and what she wanted to do, it was just more learn as we go along. It was just fun project to kind of start off with. So the initial game that we did was all hand drawn, and it's just physically drawn onto like an iPad. I had my brother who he actually does gaming and graphics design in university, so he just started out. So it's really good for him to kind of get involved, and he knew a few bits and shortcuts that we didn't know about. So once we did the drawings and got them virtual onto a screen of some sort, it was about how we can actually present this and the best way to play a game where it's not an inconvenience, it's more natural. So then we created a website. Me and Abby actually learned coding on how to code a website. In the space of like 2-3 months, we managed to learn how to do these sort of things with websites and how to code it, how to make a whole process behind the website. So we, instead of going through the likes of Squarespace, we actually went pure native and just did it all ourselves and hosted it ourselves on a cloud platform, using what we actually do at work as like a benefit to help us know how to do that. And then once we actually managed to put it on a website, it literally just from there, it was just kind of each game that we make was how can we push ourselves to the next level? How can we do something different? So then the second game that we made was still hand-drawn, but it was interactive, it's clickable. We had to somehow make ways, so we had to create a code and a program on how to actually make it clickable and then embed it into a website. And then the third game we'd made was pretty much the most work that we've done towards the game. It took, I think, 5 to 6 months, and it was interactive, moving around. You're in like an escape room. So I think it was more learning along the route. I think everyone will agree that you don't need to have a past in gaming or anything, just an interest is enough to kind of just push you forward, and you can just learn. With the great thing there is the internet, you can learn everything and anything on there. So just go on YouTube and you can be a professional coder in apparently a week is one of the courses. So that could be a thing.
As long as you don't get distracted by the cute kittens on Roombas.
Exactly.
the YouTube downfall. Okay, and then Evelyn and Brandon, how about you guys?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start off quickly by saying my background's in biomedical engineering and then electronic engineering. I've always had an interest in gaming, but I suppose I decided at the start that the best decision would be to empower myself with a science and engineering background, because then you put yourself in a position where you become a problem solver. And as long as you have problem solving skills, the world's your oyster to some degree, because people can't really tell you can't do something because you can, and then you can just continue solving problems. And that's kind of like similar to paperless games. I suppose we were always able to develop our own technical solutions. So we were able to develop our own website when the time came. Whenever we encountered any problems, such as the user being able to build their own controller online, there was no plugins or anything like that available for this sort of solution. We developed our own mini engine in the background to be able to do that. And then people saw, well, it's really cool, this doesn't exist elsewhere. Yeah, I'd say definitely that aspect. But although the technical side of things is really empowers you, it's definitely, I suppose, not enough. And like the real difficult thing for me has been balancing the soft skills with the technical side of things, and learning to, always being able to listen to other people and work really well with other people and accept all these creative ideas that other people have. And that's when like amazing ideas occur. And we've been really lucky. Evelyn's an extraordinary creative individual, and we've been able to work with so many creative people all around the world in our Zoom calls, and they've contributed so much to what we've been doing. And having the soft skills, I suppose, is crucial to be able to see that, and having the technical skills is crucial to being able to implement upon that.
Yeah. For me, I had a very different start than Brandon. I'm a lot less technical and a lot more into design. So I started, I wanted to do animation, when I was a teenager. I really liked playing games, but I never really thought that I would be able to make them. I thought, you know, it's just, I didn't think I'd want to do programming basically. But I did a gaming and animation course in GTI, and I only did the gaming part because that was the only animation course there was. And I was quite worried about the gaming part of it because I really thought I was going to have to be like on the ground coding. That was just so daunting to me, but I went into it and actually realized that coding isn't as terrifying as it seems. It's actually really creative. And it just like gives you sort of the freedom, like Brandon was saying, to make something the way you want it, rather than sort of having to use what's already there, kind of mashing stuff together to make something sort of what you want. But my main focus still is design, but having that like background in coding like does help me a lot. So from there I went into TU Dublin to do a game design degree, where I mainly focused on like design and art, but obviously just with that degree, like still have a fundamental understanding of coding, which helps a lot. So when we went into BioWave, like I really didn't think that I would ever be able to work on the solution to the hardware problem I had. There's obviously an accessibility within the software of games, which, you know, I was sort of leaning more that way. But when I met Brandon and he was actually able to, you know, build a solution to my problem, and I obviously that was amazing for me. I was still working with games, but I'm not actually making games, but using all of the design skills I learned on the web tool and our website and our communication and teamwork skills. We actually started, the first thing we did together as a team was a game jam. So we did Global Game Jam in 2020, I think, yeah. And that was like when we started working as a team, and we were like, oh, this is really fun. So that's actually a really good way to find a good team, is to force yourself to be with each other for 48 hours and work together and not kill each other. You'll probably be all right in a startup. So yeah, that was our
no guarantees though.
Yeah, no guarantees.
Yeah, that's great. And I think there's an enormous amount of great stories out there about startups that started things like jams, startup weekends. Like if you can survive that intense weekend, you stand a good chance. Super. Here, Beth, will you round us off, please, and then we'll sum up all of this.
Well, I think I did things backwards. I did the game first and then the degree. No, I was always a really curious kid. I always wanted to know how things worked. I always wanted to but I didn't like just understanding. I wanted to be able to do things. That said, my dad told me at the age of 10 that he thought I would be very good at coding, and I told him, no, go away. I don't want to do that. 4 years later, I ate my words, and he likes to remind me of that to this day, where I actually got somebody else to build the first 6 levels of my contact. There are 60 levels in the game, but the first 6 were developed by a friend of mine called Cormac Kinsella, who without him, the app would not exist, because the way I learned to code was I basically took apart every line of code that he wrote and watched to see which part of the app it broke. And that was how I understood coding. That was how I learned to code. I broke things over and over and over until I understood exactly which parts were interacting with which. It was written in Swift, which is a good starter language, but not exactly the most universal or useful one. I now use a lot of Python, which is much more useful in the broader scheme of things. But it's kind of that perfect merger of, you know, I was part of the generation where we didn't have smartphones in the very early years of our lives, but we had them by the time we were 9 and 10. So we grew up with gaming being a super accessible, super cheap thing compared to, like, I remember Nintendo games when I was 8 being like 60 or 70 euros. They were something you got one of once a year if you were very lucky, to being able to download hundreds of apps a day at no cost. So it was kind of a case of I broke a lot of things. There was a lot of, and that was probably why it took so long. Instead of learning the conventional way, instead of taking out the books, I just decided I was going to break things until they worked. But kind of, I think we see game development as being something that is difficult to do, difficult to access, something that is a massive challenge to overcome, something you need a degree in, when in reality, absolutely, there are things in a degree that are very useful to know. It makes your skills applicable to a wider context. But at the end of the day, if gaming is something you really want to develop for, I asked a lecturer the other day about learning to program in Java if she had any resources, and she said the best resource she could offer me was a link to a YouTube video, because the guy in the YouTube video did a better job explaining it than she ever could. So when you're in a position where a lecturer is telling you that YouTube is your best resource, you can save a lot of money by just going to YouTube instead of going and paying a university to have a lecturer tell you to go on YouTube.
Okay, I have a page of notes. Oh, I can't see those. I have a page of notes. I think this is so interesting, the different paths here. I love the idea of break it to learn it. Break it, fix it, move on, repeat. And also the idea of get help, right? That's connected. The don't know how to do it, someone else is going to do it, then I'm going to break it and learn it from them. And that way I will learn. And that's really good. Pulling in your brother, very handy and tactical to send him into a course that was going to help you in this avenue. Absolutely. And team and collaboration then as part of that of well, maybe it does take a village, or at least a small group, and you know, that way you don't need to have every skill. Your team needs to have every skill that you need. And then you do need these lovely soft ones like listening and collaboration. And everybody has that job interview question about that group project in college and that time that person did nothing and what you did to fix and save the day, right? We've all been there, done that. So teamwork is hard, and people have different ways of working too, that can sometimes make that hard, but overcoming those, and I suppose a goal like getting a game released is a really good way to do that. I loved the very different side of it, Keith, on there's a small set of jobs available, I'm gonna skill up. I don't know why you're not calling yourself Dr. Keith. If I survived a PhD, I certainly would. And then that bravery of, well, it's not here, so I might have to move. And being okay to follow your passion, and even if that means travel and going further. Curious about a post-COVID world, if that is still needed to the same extent. I'd say possibly still, maybe. Speciality as well as a focus area and expertise, and the look and connection of, I just happened to ask the Ramiro's a question at a time, I don't know, they're about to set up in Ireland, like fortune and the chance of the roll of dice, which is why actually I think sessions like this and connection and networking, particularly when we get back to the physical, are just so important for anyone in any business. I also liked that approach of, we're going to iterate this, so it's going to be hand drawings, and then we're going to do a little bit of clickable interactive, and then we're going to go much deeper on the interactive. So we're going to do this in phases, get this first thing right, and move on that way. And we're learning along the route. And I think that's a bit like break to learn, right? We sometimes are afraid that what we need is perfection from moment one. When I used to work with startups, I used to like to say, to get your ugly baby out the door. It's okay to have an MVP, a minimum viable product, to have something that works, that is good, not great. And my current manager, her favorite phrase is, don't let great be the enemy of good. And I think it's so true here, as it is anywhere else in tech, as it is in any other career. I think then there is one other one that I picked up on, which was customers and a focus on solving problems. And I think that's what you're all doing. And nobody said, oh, I have excellent CX skills. You should see my validation processes. They're amazing. I learn all about my customer and my user. And, you know, no one talked about design thinking. And maybe those aren't the words or phraseology you're putting on it, but it certainly seems to be the kind of thing you're doing, is understanding your user and building for them. And Eileen and Brandon, your community, for example, and I totally forget what you call it now, the matching, find a match person, is just an excellent understanding of, we're building for people and we need to understand our people. So that was great. So much there. So we'll move on and talk a bit. I'd like to talk a bit about gaming as connection, because what had struck me when we met first a week or two ago in advance of this talk to chat was that you were all sources of connection. So BioWave is a connection and a way to overcome a barrier, a physical barrier that stopped you taking part in this community. My Contact is a way to help people, neurodivergent or just regular, like out of the box person who still has trouble with eye contact. Paperless games born out of a pandemic, and then Ramiro's, I imagine, massive great growth during the pandemic, and gaming as a connection. So we might let's start with BioWave on that one, and talk a bit, you've mentioned it already, but let's talk a bit about that connection.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll let Evelyn start with this.
Yeah, so I guess obviously gaming is a huge part of our culture and community, and I mean, the vast majority of people are playing games now, and that's only growing. And I think like the biggest part for a lot of people is the social element of gaming, which I think for a lot of our customers, people that we work with, is one of the biggest struggles that they have. A lot of them, maybe they're able to play games in their own space where, you know, they're free to, you know, play, like the hardware that they have isn't letting them play to the best of their ability, but, you know, they're comfortable in their own space to try that out. But the biggest challenge they have is when they're playing with other people who are using hardware that is adapted to them, and playing against that is really difficult for them. And there's a lot of games that are competitive games that they can't play, especially a lot of kids. We find that the biggest challenge because it's really frustrating for them. And, you know, it's a lot harder when you're young to get over that frustration and to really understand the problem, you know, like, why can't I do it? I just want to be able to play with everyone else. So what our controller we found is doing is just letting people play their own way. So, you know, they can build their controller, and if it's not working exactly, they can move something around, and just enables them to play the way that they want to. And then another great thing about our controller is that it works for everyone, because we use universal design principles. So we built for everyone, not just for people with disabilities, or not just for specific disabilities. It really does work for everyone. So one thing that people say is that it's really great that they can play with the same device with someone else who doesn't have a disability, and they can play using the same ways. That's like another element of connection that people get. And then in terms of our broader community, we wanted to ensure that everyone has the ability to build a controller despite their tech knowledge or level, or whether people have cognitive impairments or anything. Parents who are helping their kids who maybe don't understand games as well, by developing a community of people that are building the controllers, and they can share their controllers. It just enables everyone to find a solution that works for them despite their abilities.
Yeah. Well, the thing I want to say is there's an extraordinary element. There's a great element of crack associated with being able to, you know, do video games as part of what you're doing as a job. But we've been really fortunate to have been invited out to a lot of the testers' houses in Galway and around Ireland that we've been building controllers for. And it is, everyone has their own, all these people have their own stories, you know, somewhat similar to Evelyn's, but obviously unique in their own way. And they all name people. They all name people that they can't play with. Yeah. Every single one of them, and that seems to be one of the biggest, you know, things on their mind. So, you know, when we build a controller with them, and that moment when they start playing, it's just so cool to see. And they always, you know, they'll have their uncle there, or they'll talk about their friend that they can play with, or any of this sort of stuff. And then we actually take the opportunity to play video games with them, because I mean, how cool is that, getting to go around Ireland playing video games in loads of different people's houses? But you know, we have a really good time like playing with them then, and it's really cool to see all these individuals just having so much fun playing the video games, and the things they say about what they could do before versus what they can do now in a very real way. You know, you can really feel the connection.
Yeah, I think like one of the best things about working with games is that you're building something that connects people, and you're connecting yourself to that through that. You know, you're like, everyone I think here like knows that they're like a part of what they're making, and to see people even just use what they, or play the game that they made, or even when you're testing and you see how people use it, maybe you wouldn't have ever thought that anyone would do that. You know, maybe it's even breaking the game. We're like, oh, but you know, like you see how people work and how they interact with what you're doing, and it's just really, really cool. So I think it's something really special about making games and working within games as well.
Great. Yeah, I love that they can name who they want to play with. And it's just that simple thing, excuse me, of connecting to people and making people just be able to do what they want to do. It's lovely. That's a great sense of achievement to go to bed with every night of here's what I did today. So that's phenomenal. Like Ciara Beth, I think that actually ties very closely to your experience too.
In more ways than one, funnily enough. Interestingly, I also have a connective tissue disorder, which means that there are days when I can't leave the house. It is just not an option. My joints are not going to stay in the place that they should. So I have to limit what I'm doing. And on those days, gaming is how I can still hang out with my friends. It provides that sense of normalcy. It's the thing that keeps me sane when I'm sitting in a hospital waiting room for 6 hours. It's a companion on its own. And interestingly, my contact on the surface, obviously, was targeted at helping people make social connections. My contact was also the means of me making a lot of social connections in the course of making it. When I started my contact, I wouldn't answer a question if I was asked by a teacher in class. I would not speak. I did not like talking. I did not do the communication thing very well at all. I hated being in front of people. Fast forward 3 years at the Young Scientist, you don't get the choice to just not talk. You have to explain what you did, explain why you did it. And having that passion and that drive of wanting to help people like me helped me overcome that barrier of, oh, people, no thank you. It's one of those crazy stories where I started off wanting to help other people, and in the course of it, it helped me. Gaming is a really, really unique field in that it can offer support without it feeling like a chore. Like when you have to do physical therapy 2 hours of the day every day, it gets incredibly boring. When you have to do certain exercises for occupational therapy every day, it gets boring really quickly. And a lot of the resources are targeted at younger kids. But the reality of it is, even as adults, we don't like doing boring things. And our drive to complete boring tasks goes down because they are boring. You'd much rather sit and play like a round of Mario Kart over, you know, doing a college assignment. That's just how we are as humans. We want to go to the thing that's entertaining. And in combining gaming with those therapies and combining gaming with tools that are designed to help people, we're giving people the opportunity to feel like their therapy is less therapeutic and more fun.
That's, yeah, super. Putting the fun in the therapy, in the day-to-day, in the different things we need to do. And I think I really love that piece of, I set out to help other people, but it actually helped me. And Ciara Beth, when I first met you, not too long ago, because we make ourselves sound old, up in Galway, as a 15-year-old, you were telling me about this game you just built, and you were standing there in the middle of a start lab, perfect eye contact, chatting away, and at the end of your elevator pitch, you went, and would it surprise you to learn that I have autism? And a few years on, that still sticks with me as one of those moments where, you know, it's probably the best elevator pitch I've heard ever, Ciara Beth, if I'm honest, and just that it really did work to help connect you to the world. Also, when you're not gaming, when you're offline, when you're in person, and I think that's a phenomenal tool for anybody who's shy, let alone someone who has this challenge of a neurodivergent way of being. So it's really it's a really powerful tool then, because you're helping people all of the time and not just when they're gaming. And then Anvi and Vitesh, if we come to you, a global pandemic, like families literally separated, stuck in rooms. Don't do I need to describe it if everybody just wants to refresh their minds on the last 18 years? 18 years, it felt like years, didn't it? 18 months. What an opportunity to try use a game to connect.
Yeah, the whole reason we created this was genuinely to connect people with each other. We had families like based in Ireland, some in Galway, some in Cork, some in Dublin. They were all like go on a Zoom call and play the game, and it was really nice. People would forget they're on a Zoom call playing this game, and as soon as this game like finished, they'll be like, "Oh, do you have any more? Can we play another one?" And we're like, "Oh, you kind of need to book it," because like during the Christmas period and the Halloween period, it was just super busy. Like we're back-to-back games, and people were so invested in it, and people were like, "Oh, I've never done this with my family. I've never done this with my friends," and it was just amazing. Like people were like just spending time together, trying to solve this problem, trying to play this game. It was really cool. And then even when we went to like the corporate world, like there were so many teams that are based in, like they have team members that are based all around the world. Like there are people in America, Asia, Europe, and they have all these teams, but they only meet up once a year for team events, because they can't obviously fly everyone in at one central location. And this they came up to us and they were like, "Oh, this gives us a chance for our team to actually meet up and do a fun event a lot more often because it's virtual." And we had like all these different companies. I think we hosted once for 200 participants at one point, from people all around the world, and they all were in small little groups, and they met people from their team that they've never met before. It connected them. So yeah, I did think our game really helped during the pandemic. Yeah, what do you think, Bea?
Yeah, I think, yeah, spot on. All of that. Another good example was when we first started, and even now, we did a Freshers Week for university in the UK, Kingston University. And obviously at that time is when pandemic hit, so Freshers Week couldn't happen, which we thought was quite a big area, because obviously that's where you meet new people, new students, and make some friends for the first time. So we did this Freshers Week, we did a game session. I think we had 150 individuals join. And I think the biggest takeaway for us was a group of friends were created due to that. They actually went to a coffee shop afterwards, and they went to grab some food. And then they insta message us every now and then to just say, "Look, we are still friends, by the way. Like, thank you very much for getting us together." And it made their process getting into university a lot easier, because you've walked in knowing someone. And if it's definitely virtual as well, it is tough. And they met people in different sort of courses, different areas. And even when you're in Freshers Week, you don't get the opportunity to meet people in such a variety of courses. It's normally your course and you stick with your course, but this opened it up to you can meet anyone and everyone and make friends across the whole of the university campus. So that was a really good experience as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? That it is the families and the friends who want to connect who are now separated, but also that actually there's people going through these massive life moments like starting university, and it's different from what any of us experience, that you're having to do this remotely. I love that they still message you. They clearly want to be in your first advertising campaign, and you should get them signed up now. Well, they're not going to cost a lot. And I love too this idea of actually possibly one of the positive side effects of this pandemic has been that we see the power of virtual. So that that company, those people who work remotely and only get to meet once a year pre-pandemic, there's now actual better resources for them to stay connected in their remote locations post-pandemic. So I think that's a really nice build on it too, that maybe we think of connection lost as during the pandemic, but maybe there are opportunities to increase connection regardless of pandemic. And then Keith, I would imagine you had a massive amount of growth during the pandemic.
Yeah, we did. Some of that was just driven by the fact that we had to release a game during the pandemic, which wasn't the easiest thing to do. We all of a sudden all found ourselves at home and lugging dev kits into our homes and trying to get the game out the door. But yeah, just in terms of connections from the games, well, I mean, there's two parts of it. I think as game developers, I think as an industry in general, we're finally starting to realize the power of community and the developing a community around the company and around our games. And I think Evelyn and Brandon are going to read it exactly the right way. wrapping up a community with the product and trying to get people involved and get people talking to each other. You're right that the pandemic was, I don't want to use the word positive, but people found a lot of connection through games. I know are countless stories of people saying, yeah, normally I'd only let my kids play games, however many hours a week, but it's the only way they get to hang out with their friends. So now I let them play a lot more. I've talked to a producer on Fortnite who said you'd be amazed how much of the success of Fortnite is down to how much people play together and the community around it and the connection that people play. People just log into Fortnite and they don't even really pay all that much attention when they're playing. Sometimes they just want to talk to their friends and want to hang out and see each other. And I think that's a lot. It goes into a lot of what Epic, the work they've been doing on crossplay, which is a sort of a more recent phenomenon that the first parties were quite resistant to, letting Xbox players play with PlayStation players and so on. But Epic have really been pushing the way forward there, and it's all around the community. If people can play with their friends, regardless of how they play or where they play, it's just better for everybody.
Yeah, that's so true, the power of community. And I love this idea of community now going across device, so that there are no barriers. It's people connecting as they want to connect with the people they want to connect, regardless of hardware. So really, really a build. And actually, it's something that I'm keen to, I suppose, end this section with, is that observation that the media can give technology, and I'd say gaming in particular, a bad reputation. And all of what your examples from every panelist have just been stories of social connection. And in this time where we endured physical isolation to protect one another, gaming became a source of connection. And the really positive impact on mental health is probably not going to make headlines anytime soon, but that's actually a real shame, because I think this is a really good news story. So we're almost close to the end. I know we have one question in the Q&A. I think, Jerry, you took it away because it's kind of answered, but if anybody wants to put one in, I've got one last question for the panelists, and it's just a minute each on the future. So I'd like to ask you each what you're most excited about in the next few years in your industry. And we'll start with Anvi and Patricia.
Yeah, I'll shoot on that one actually. So we're actually working on, we're trying to do, so it's going to be a long process to wait, of bringing in virtual reality and augmented reality headsets and things into our game to kind of bring another step to that virtual element. So I think using, these cool tools out there, there's amazing gadgets that bring reality to you, is a great way of kind of advancing games. And I know a lot of games companies are already doing this, and it's becoming a really big thing. So I think it's utilizing those elements and the tools that are already readily available and for the future is a key way of kind of pushing towards a different environment of games and making that a normal.
Yeah, you covered it pretty much.
VR of murder mystery could be pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Keith, how about you?
The next few years, I'll answer from a purely selfish point of view. The tech in games, every time a new generation of consoles comes out, everyone tries to find their feet and tries to figure out, what it can do, what's the best way it can do it. And then every year you'll see, if you look at the games at the beginning of the PS3 era versus the end of the PS3 era, there's just night and day. It's the same hardware, but people have been finding new ways to exploit it and develop new ways of making new games. And the tools available to developers are only getting better and better, like Unity and Unreal, Game Maker, Godot engine. Everything is out there. Like Kirbet said, there's YouTube videos for anybody who wants to become a game developer, they can, and now there's the tools available to them for free. Really powerful tools that are only getting better and better, and they're used by AAA studios. So it's really, I don't see anything massive changing in the next few years, but it's just the fact that people don't have to fight against the technology so much anymore. They can focus on just making great games and the games they want to, and small teams are able to have a big impact.
That's great. So I think gaming is in some ways quite unique as a technology in that those barriers to entry can be quite low. And that, you know, these great powerful tools are available to help people get in and get started. So yeah, that's obviously something to be very excited about. More people making anything, the better it gets. It's a rising tide, right? It'll float all the boats. So that's really cool. We'll go Evelyn and Brandon, you guys next.
Sure. So my selfish one is that I really like games from my childhood that are all being remade now, such as like the most recent Crash Bandicoot. I was nerding out big time over that, and I was so happy when it came out. That seems to be happening with a couple of different games, which really excites me. But then I suppose a bigger interest again for me is hardware. So how hardware is going to be integrated into the gaming space. Now that everyone's like, it seems like potentially a renaissance of like gaming hardware could be upcoming. As hardware is more accessible. So kind of like, I suppose, VR, but also, you know, other tech developments like, you know, the likes of quantum computing. How could that be integrated into gaming? That could be really interesting. Who knows? But also, I suppose our solution is hardware. So
yeah, I think the most exciting for me is the trend in accessibility in gaming. Like, I think most games now have basic accessibility features, if not, and some games like The Last of Us came out last year and it was crazy. You could play without completely blind and you would still be able to make it through the whole entire game. So the trend in accessibility is really huge. And I really hope that keeps going. And I think for us, the most exciting part for us is that we're like releasing our controller at the end of this month, on the 30th of October. And we just hope that, like, obviously that we can just keep going with what we're doing with accessibility and hardware in mind, and just hopefully make games more accessible to everyone. So that's it.
Very good. And I'm going to talk about your controller at the end, don't worry. And yeah, so accessibility and improvements in both software but also hardware. And again, it's the more people who can play, the more connection, the better. So Kira, Beth, we'll give you the last word on this one.
So yeah, I suppose I am in a very weird position where I don't know right now where I'm going to end up. My career, technically speaking, hasn't even started. So I'm very interested to see, I don't know, will I end up in industry or research? I'm really interested in a lot of the research that's going on in the field at the moment. In the last few months, there's this video game in the States that has just been given FDA approval to treat ADHD in children ages 8 to 12 that is showing promising kind of progress for those children involved in those studies. So I'm very interested to see where gaming research goes, because it is such a new field. I think the industry, while it's new, has at least some experience, whereas we're only really starting to research gaming now as how it can help people, because it has had such a bad rap for such a long time. So I'm just interested to see where A, I end up, and B, where gaming ends up.
The first one's a massive question. I am several years into my career and I still don't know where I'll end up. So don't worry about that one. None of us know the answer there. And yeah, okay, fascinating. So research that gaming as a way to treat something like ADHD, yeah, the potential in it. The gamification of everything, I think, is another build on that, and where things could go, like loyalty apps, something I look at sometimes in my day job, like the gamification of the things we do every day. So yeah, as well as the day-to-day, the actual helping people. Amazing. Guys, we could chat for hours. This has just been fascinating and I really have loved it. We have 2 questions in the Q&A and I am going to pick one of them. And we go with, well, the first one was a lovely comment from our Tech Talk chairman, John, saying he really enjoyed it and wishing you all continued success. And then the second one is from Enda, and Enda asks, are the panelists engaged in any scholastic programs which bring the skills and benefits of games to schools in a trusted manner?
I kind of have some of this one covered. So basically, yes and no. I do a lot of work on contract with an organization called Kinia, who were formerly Canara Education Ireland, who run the Tech Space program and the Tech Space Oswelga program. And their focus is to deliver STEAM skills to teachers, to teach teachers how to teach things like robotics, coding, filmmaking. So it focuses on digital media in the much broader sense, but there are gaming elements within that, obviously, and app development and such, which it's an absolutely fabulous program. They are a large part of the reason that I have half of the skills that I have. They are the main reason that I got the scholarships that I got, which is the reason that I got to go to college. So they're a really fabulous program that definitely, if you are involved in the education sector whatsoever, check them out. They're absolutely incredible.
Kira, you might just type their name or address into the chat. That would be, or into the Q&A or chat, whichever one people can see it. Guys, to keep everybody on time, we had another great comment in from Gillian saying how much she enjoyed this. I'm going to start wrapping up, and I really want to thank the panel because it really has just been fascinating. This isn't a topic I knew much about, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much. I'd imagine to an awful lot of our participants. Even if you knew a lot about gaming, I think there's been so many different elements here that I'm sure everybody has taken something from this. I do want to give a very special mention to BioWave. So your controller is launching on the 30th, I'm telling you, like you don't know, on the 30th of October. And people can sign up to be notified on your website. And I am going to put that link to your website in the chat now so that everybody can see it. The other thing I would say is that we have people on this call, they're at BioWave on all social media. If you want to pick your social media and do a shout out for an emerging Irish company, that could be your random act of kindness for the day, and hopefully get the message about their controller out in time. I'm going to end with just thanking everyone, thanking our wonderful panelists. It's been fascinating. Thank you to our very generous sponsor, Ernst & Young, and to the Tech Talk Committee for the work putting this together, and to our audience for listening. Have a good time, and we'll be in touch about a new Tech Talk soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.